We would like to play.
Hey everyone, John from Nintendo Live here, and we are celebrating the 15th birthday of the Nintendo Wii. And Alex Olney, that's half your life.
What, 15? Yeah, nearly. I'm not 30 yet, you little whippersnapper, but I will be soon.
Xeon, that's not quite half your life, but it's getting there.
It's almost there, and that is terrifying, John. Alex, I don't like this. How do we stop it?
How do we stop time?
And John will be reaching 15 any minute now.
Any day now. We're actually late to this. We're a few days late to this, but that's okay because we're a few days early, well, a few weeks early to the UK release. So the Wii launched on November 19th, 2006 in America, but December 8th, 2006 in the UK. And I remember, I was too young to just go and buy a Wii myself. It didn't go to like a midnight launch. But I remember being on game.co.uk and just refreshing the page and waiting for it to come back in stock, for it to go from coming soon to out now. That's my sad story about the Wii launch. But did any of us buy a Wii on launch day?
No, didn't even buy it launch year. I think I bought mine in like 2013.
Different perspectives coming in here though. Xeon, where did you come into the Wii?
Yeah, so I started the Wii on day one, baby. It was all thanks to my grandpa. I'm pretty sure I've told this story before, so I'll keep it brief. But yeah, my grandpa stood in line to have the ability to pre-order a Wii. You know, like this was a few weeks before the system came out, or maybe a few months even. I can't remember, but yeah, he stood in line in our local mall and pre-ordered a Wii for me. And on launch day, like at midnight or 11 p.m. or whatever, we went to the mall with a couple friends and my mom, and we picked up the Wii, and it was completely mind-blowing just being able to play such a healthy selection of launch games, I will say, because I picked up a few, and I don't have to necessarily get into which ones I bought right away, but I loved the Wii from the start and even towards the end as well.
It was a massive deal at the time. I mean, considering where Nintendo were, like in terms of their business, like the NES and Super Nintendo were major successes, and the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance were sort of carrying that flame. But every console since then was just slowly getting lesser and lesser. Like N64 was definitely far less popular than the PlayStation. GameCube is one of their least popular platforms ever. Like it's not too far from the Wii U. Like compared to PS2, it was. I mean, don't want to throw a harsh word, but it was kind of a failure. And then the Wii came along, and all of a sudden Nintendo were back on top. Like this gave them a huge rush, and without the Wii, it's hard to say where they would really be today in the console space. So it really was important for the time, but it also changed not only Nintendo's trajectory, but also just the casual audience, that it brought them in and made them involved in this industry. And you're right, Zine, like the launch was great. Like everyone got Wii Sports, apart from those in Japan where it wasn't bundled. But we also got a Zelda game. Like Twilight Princess was a launch title. And like the variety at launch was great. Like Excite Truck, we had Monkey Ball Banana Blitz, which is but also things like Red Steel and Trauma Center and Rayman Raving Rabbids. Like it was a pretty varied launch.
Right? Yeah, it felt like there was not every game was game of the year worthy, or even a perfect title by any means. But just the wealth of diversity amongst the lineup was impressive. I think you look at so many different systems. I mean, and maybe looking this far back is unfair, but like the N64, for example, it had an excellent launch lineup too, but it was, only like 3 games or something like that in the US at least, or maybe in Europe as well?
Wasn't it just Mario 64 and Pilot Wings? Was that it?
Was it just that?
It was pretty slim,
that sounds
wasn't
right.
it?
Yeah. It is a fascinating console, especially for the time, because 360 was already out at this point. And that was aiming for such a different audience. Like that was pushing visuals and giving
At the time, it was aiming at a different audience.
Yeah. The 360's target audience definitely changed as time went on. But it was definitely giving something very different, which is what I love about consoles at that point. Like every system offered something very different. Whereas now, they're kind of all the same box with just different exclusives. But the Wii was so different to 360 and PlayStation 3. Not only because its hardware was basically a generation behind, because it was basically a GameCube, but with widescreen being a standard. That was more or less what it was. But developers had to use those limitations to really go deep into what they can offer games, and with the controller too. And there was a lot of growing pains. A lot of games definitely had waggle to begin with, and the motion didn't always work great. But I think developers started to understand that pointing was kind of the big part of the Wii, and so many of the Wii's best games revolve entirely around that pointer. It also kind of like revived the on-rail shooter genre, which was that was kind of struggling at the time because we were moving away from CRTs. But the Wii revived that by offering such great pointing. Like, look at the launch lineup; it was great. And then it also launched with the Virtual Console, which gave us NES and Super Nintendo and N64 and TurboGrafx 16 and Master System and Mega Drive and Neo Geo and Commodore 64 and MSX and arcade games. Like, you had a rich library from day one. And GameCube. GameCube was there too. That was backwards compatible.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to look back and see how that the Wii was backwards compatible with GameCube games, because I mean nowadays with the Switch, it would be I don't know how they would make that work with a disk drive add-on or something like that for Wii U titles, and it's just backwards compatibility is not a thing. But we see some systems still nowadays, like Xbox Series X just released a bunch of updates for some of their classic games that now you can still play the original discs on the new system, right?
Yeah.
But back then, I mean, it feels rare that Xbox is doing this, because backwards compatibility is such a thing that we don't get it as much these days. And back then, it was like the PlayStation 2 was backwards compatible. With PlayStation 1 games, the 360 was compatible with most Xbox games. It was just commonplace, right?
It was very simple for Nintendo because they used the same architecture from GameCube until Wii U. So the Wii U can play GameCube games. Nintendo just didn't enable it. And so with the Wii, because it basically is a GameCube, it just has a GameCube mode. They can use GameCube controllers and memory cards and just put in a disc and play it just normally. Whereas with Xbox, they are going really in depth into actually making this stuff somehow work, because it's generations behind, different architectures, somehow it works for them. But we had it really, really simple, where it was a GameCube. So it was great just to have that off the bat.
It just allowed so many people to not have to worry about throwing away their GameCube games or trading them in for a new system that they didn't know if they were going to like or anything. It was just, I don't want to say there was a low risk, but it was such a great thing to just be able to still carry over your library, your rich library of GameCube games.
And your saves, because it had the slots in it as well, the memory card slots.
Yeah. As we were saying earlier, GameCube sold around 20 million units, which is really low for Nintendo. And that gave Wii owners a chance to go back and play GameCube games, which is something that I did. Like, you can go back and play Mario Sunshine or Melee or Metroid Prime and just catch up on all the games that people most likely missed because they were on PlayStation 2 or Xbox at the time. So it's just a great opportunity for that. And I'll open this up a bit more for you guys to talk about your memories in just a second. But I want to give a little perspective to just how good Wii's momentum was in that time. So we had the launch with a bunch of different games. We had like Call of Duty and Medal of Honor in there as well. But in 2007, they just wouldn't stop. So we got Mario Galaxy, we got Super Paper Mario, Mario Strikers Charged, Mario and Sonic crossed over at the Olympic Games, Mario Party 8, there's a lot of Marios that year. Metroid Prime 3, Wii Fit, Link's crossbow training was a big one. Zack and Wiki, Sonic and the Secret Rings, Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn, Resident Evil 4 Wii Edition, The Umbrella Chronicles, Endless Ocean, WarioWare Smooth Moves, Battalion Wars 2, Ghost Squad, Tomb Raider Anniversary, Pokemon Revolution, and those are all big games. But there's also things like Carnival games, which we don't look back at Carnival games fondly. But it was a big game for the system, and it was a big.
Don't look directly at it.
Yeah, but that's just kind of like the way it was going. Like, people bought the system for Wii Sports, but Nintendo just started firing out all these big first-party games too. And that didn't stop. Like, the next year we got Brawl and Mario Kart Wii and Disaster Day of Crisis and Animal Crossing. And they just like kept slowly giving out more and more games that kind of reached the core Nintendo audience while also appealing to the casuals with Wii Fit and Wii Play. And it just had this really great overall audience of pretty much everyone. But Alex, you didn't actually dive into the Wii until years later. So why was that for the time?
Well, because I was a teenager, and because I thought I was too cool. I thought that the Wii, that's like a baby's console. And that's a mentality I know a lot of teenagers had at the time, and may well still have about things like Animal Crossing and things like that. Naturally, sort of nowadays I've matured out of it, but I kind of fell out of love for Nintendo briefly, and it was the Wii. I think it was the fact that the graphics weren't any better, and I wasn't sure about the controller, and, I liked Halo. I think that was the reason I ended up going with a 360. And my brother bought a 360 almost on a whim and brought it back, and it was like, wow, it looks amazing on the CRT that we had. And eventually I got my own. I think I technically have 2 still. Somewhere I've got another one, a broken one that a friend gave me that I wrapped in a towel to fix the red ring of death, and it worked briefly. I played Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts without a hard drive for about 10 minutes before it crashed. But that's for the memories about the Xbox 360 that we'll never do. But the Wii was a system that I almost sort of wanted to... I almost ended up disliking it more than I actually did, trying to sort of convince myself that I'd made the right decision and that I was an Xbox man now. And that's an attitude that I think a lot of people have. And, you know, as I said, grown out of it now, the Wii was great. But at the same time, it is this kind of strange sort of like grey area for me when it comes to Nintendo gaming. I had a DS, but I didn't use it super often. And, I didn't have I used it for Pokemon, mostly, I think. That was about it. The Wii just wasn't on my radar. But what changed was was Smash. And not even when it came out. I was always gagging to play Brawl when it first came out and it was announced. And I was following the dojo every single day. And yet I didn't even have a Wii. And I had no opportunity to play it. But I was still following it, and years later, I think it was about 2012, 2013, something like that, I finally bought my own Wii for £40 from a Gumtree ad. I took the bus part of the way, and then I had to walk the rest with this Wii, and it was bloody heavy because it came with a load of accessories in the box and everything. I wouldn't say I instantly fell in love. One of the first games I had was Zack and Wiki, which I enjoyed, but I think something to do with the room that I was in, reflections or something, was mucking up the infrared sensor on the Wii remote, and so it was accurate enough, but sometimes it would just sort of flit about the screen. And I don't know whether it was the Wii remote itself or the sensor bar, or, as I say, reflections of something else in the room causing some interference, but it was not ideal. But then I got Smash. And that was the watershed moment. That's when I fell in love with the Wii. It was like, yep, this is it. This is what I want to play. This is the game. And it's the game that I played during the only 2-day hangover I've ever had.
Your Xbox story is funny, because like, prior to launch, I was also quite against the Wii, because I was deep into the PlayStation ecosystem, and I had a PS2 and a PSP. I was like, this is all I need. And the Wii's just some dumb iToy ripoff. And so, leading up to launch, I was super against the concept of the Wii. But then I started to get into Zelda, and I needed Twilight Princess. So that's kind of what pushed me over the edge. But what really got me into the Wii's controls was Resident Evil 4 Wii Edition. Pointing around and shooting people with the Wii remote, it's so hard to go back to any other style of shooting. I've played Resident Evil 4 on pretty much every platform, and I always just yearn to go back to pointing with the Wii remote, because it's just so accurate and fast and fluid. And then like Metroid Prime 3 Corruption did the same thing. It's just so good. Even with the Wii U, many of Nintendo's advertisements were based around pointing. Like Pikmin 3, for example. A lot of the time they showed it with the gamepad, like showing the map on like down next to you, but using the Wii remote nunchuck for moving and pointing. And that's what my ideal method of Pikmin as well. Like the new Play Controls version of Pikmin 1 and 2, I loved them so much that I kind of struggled to go back to the GameCube versions. I just love pointing.
You heard it here first, guys. John loves pointing.
I point at everyone in the street.
I've just been reminded of something it's technically not even Wii, but it sort of is at the same time. Do you guys remember the weird thing you could do in Splatoon, where you could take a Pro Controller, wrap a Wii remote around it with rubber bands, and it would work as a Wii U Pro Controller with motion controls? Do you remember that, Xeon, John?
That's for the local mode, yeah. There's an elegance to pointing that we just don't have today. Like, a lot of the time I do criticize the Joy-Con for pointing, because the Joy-Con's great for gyro-assisted movement. Like in Breath of the Wild, when you squeeze down the aiming trigger and it starts to move with gyro, that's great. In Splatoon, you have analog sticks always sort of correcting for any kind of gyro drift. That's great too. But when games try to point, like with World of Goo, for example, when it tries to mirror a Wii remote pointing, it moves so quickly. Like, it desyncs really, really fast. And there's just something about the sensor bar, because it's this fixed point that it can't desync. It's just something that you can't really replicate again, unless we get another sensor bar in the future. But it's just so accurate, and yeah, that's always been my favorite part of motion. Like when people think of the Wii, they think of flailing your arms around. They think of playing Wii Sports Tennis and just going whah! But I think pointing really was the big part of that system.
Can I argue against that? Like,
Sure.
I'm not saying it's not a big part of the system. It absolutely was, and I think you're right. When it works really well. But that issue I mentioned with Zack and Wiki, I have had that every single time I've played the Wii. I have never been able to get the pointing to be accurate. And I don't know if it's something, like I've got a reflective surface, which is causing the infrared LEDs to be reflected, which is something that I know is a big thing. Or maybe, there's a source of heat that's confusing it. Any number of things could be the reason. But as a result, I've never really liked pointing controls. Ever.
That's strange. Have you ever experienced that, Xeon? Or what's your experience with pointing like?
For the most part, as long as the sensor bar is in the right place, I've definitely, it's something that you have to calibrate, I suppose, and fiddle with. But I guess I've never, John was kind of you were talking about Resident Evil 4, right? So I played Resident Evil 4 on the PlayStation, on the GameCube and the PlayStation 2, but the Wii was where like I really got lost in it and played it multiple times. And I think I tried. I don't know if anyone else actually remembers this, but if you try to play it with a Wii Zapper, it's not impossible, but it's not designed for it because
I tried
is
that.
it you use the B button, right, to pull out your gun, and then the A button to shoot.
Yeah,
it's terrible. But I don't really have any negative memories looking back on the Wii though. But I think it is one of those things, or with the motion controls or pointer controls specifically, depending on the room you're in or the situation. Alex, was your sensor bar, was the cable chewed up by a cat? Because lots of cats seem to have a fondness for Wii sensor bar cables.
I'm gonna blow your mind. I did not have a cat at my rented room at university.
No, not everybody just snuck a cat into their university dorms.
I do actually know of someone who did sneak a rabbit into their room and kept it there for a year.
But I think I have very fond memories of pointer controls with the Wii, especially like you said, light gun games too. One Christmas I picked up Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles, nice. And I think at the time, I think I miss this. This is slightly off topic, but I sort of miss the times of being told like if a game's good or not before you play it. I think I love going into a game blind, and as journalists here, I feel like this contradicts what we do. But I think that Christmas I went into Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles blind, or I read about it in Nintendo Power or something, and then I also bought. Fortunately, get ready, guys. I also bought Knight's Journey into Dreams.
Oh no!
And
is that not a good game? I've got that. It's can't.
Not great.
Oh, okay.
I'm very curious to go back to it again now, but at the time, I hated it, and I think that was one of those times where I'm contradicting myself. I probably read a review and saw some negative things, or I ignored all of it and I went in and I hated the experience. So. But I remember not a lot of people loved Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles at the time, or maybe it's nowadays because the story isn't the same and there's a lot of fan service. But I loved it. It felt like you were playing an arcade rail shooter at home.
Yeah,
I'm glad to hear. And with the PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 1, you had the gun con and all the different accessories, and it was just. It was hassle-free here. It was wireless, you had, you just popped the game in and you were good to go. And everybody had a Wii for the most part. So it wasn't like most people knew how to play it already. And it was just, yeah, I really enjoyed pointer controls. I have a friend actually that used to play Call of Duty Modern Warfare, Reflex Edition, I think it was called.
They had a passionate community. Like, up until the servers went down, people were playing that to death, like even over like the new Call of Duties, and people are still doing that on Wii U. Like Call of Duty Ghosts, sure. Black Ops 2, both have Wii remote support, and people are still playing it because they love that control scheme so much.
Wow, yeah, that's something I would really love to go back to. I know you talked about it in the Wii U video. I think you did. Was it Black Ops 2 that you showed off?
I think it was Black Ops 2 that we tested. Yeah.
Okay, but the pointer controls are just it's such a bummer too, because the Switch tries them. Like with you brought up actually in the Wii video you did the other day. You talked about Silent Hill Shattered Memories, and I would love to see that game come to Switch so badly. But you raised the question that the some of the features that made the game so great on the Wii, like the built-in speaker in the controller. There were some games that would use it for little sound effects or things, but Shattered Memories uses it for like phone calls, and you can't speak into it because it has no microphone. But the idea is you hold it up to your head, right, and then you hear the phone call. Well, on the Switch, I mean, I guess they could make the Joy-Con rumble and make some weird phone sounds, but that I don't think that would translate very well.
No.
And the flashlight
Wasn't there
controls,
another
it's
game
just
that did that?
I mean, WarioWare Smooth Moves had a mini game where you pick up the phone and just goes like,
it does. Yeah. You have to have it.
No, I swear there was another game where it has conversation. I might actually, now that I think about it, I might be thinking of Metal Gear Solid 5. I want to say.
Oh, on PS4,
like
Yeah. So
totally.
that's not the Wii, is it?
Not quite, but they're both games.
I'd like to very quickly just say something positive because I feel like
Sure.
I've been dunking on the Wii, and I love the Wii. For a long time in my life I was critical of it. I just want to say something positive, just to kind of take the taste out of my mouth, and that's Super Mario Galaxy.
Yeah.
I didn't need the pointer controls for that. I know you could get star bits, but I didn't give a nonsense about them. I just run into them, and I love that game. I wasn't mad keen on the shaking to spin around. I think that was fairly common to have that opinion, but I still played that game to completion, including the Luigi side.
Yeah, it's just so imaginative, and like even in 3D All Stars, it still looks pretty modern at times. Like Galaxy's art direction just feels timeless.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a few rough places here and there. I find the color a little bit weird in some places, a little bit muted, but, minor things, really.
I think they did a great job with the tool set that they had to work with. Because I think when you look at like Super Mario Sunshine or even Super Smash Bros. Melee on the GameCube, and you compare them to what the Wii had, I mean, Brawl was definitely more...
It was a different direction, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. It was more, I don't want to say adult, but they made everything a bit darker, kind of, as well, right? And
maybe they were trying to appeal to a more core audience rather than a casual one. To sort of say, hey, look, guys, we do serious games too.
Yeah, that was the time when Twilight Princess came out. I mean, Brawl came out a few years later, but I think that the Link model in Brawl looks very close to Twilight Princess Link. So I wonder if Nintendo was like, we have to make Link look exactly like he does in Twilight Princess, and then somebody like,
why doesn't everyone look like Twilight Princess?
Everybody has to now.
But we mentioned all these different games, like we have Mario Galaxy, which is a platformer, Mario Kart a racing game, Brawl a fighting game, and they all have very different controls. Like even WarioWare, which just does whatever it wants. But sometimes Nintendo games just adapted to the controller in very surprising ways. Like look at Punch-Out, for example. Punch-Out doesn't use motion, unless you play with the Wii Fit board, which you probably shouldn't. You might put the Wii Remote on its side like an NES controller, and just play regular old Punch-Out. Like, it didn't use any of the Wii's specific abilities, it just went for raw, classic Punch-Out gameplay. And that was awesome. Like Punch-Out Wii is my favourite in the series by far. And then other games too, like Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn, was pretty much just another GameCube game, Like, I think you could even play it with the GameCube controller if you wanted to. Same with Sonic Colors. Like, that also worked with the GameCube controller.
It was a lot better with the GameCube controller.
It was a lot better with the GameCube controller. They sort of enabled all these different styles and let you play how you want to. Like, even like New Super Mario Bros. Wii, one of the biggest games on the system, barely used motion. It was just mostly about, like, you can shake to spin. That was about it, though. It's just the convenience of having just like a D-pad style controller.
Yeah, and you got things like Xenoblade Chronicles, which was the same thing. It was just... I mean, I don't think you could play that without a classic controller or a GameCube controller.
You could use a nunchuck, but it wasn't ideal. Yeah, and it was bundled with the classic controller, so that it was like, that's the ideal setup.
A red one.
Yeah, and that's kind of interesting too about Xenoblade, because Xenoblade, The Last Story and Pandora's Tower had a hard time in America, didn't they, Xeon?
They sure did. I remember, Project Rainfall, was that what it was called?
That was what it was
called. At least, did those games? I'm not aware, but how did they launch in Europe? Did they come out like normal?
Yeah, we didn't really struggle for them. We got Xenoblade 1 year after Japan in 2011, and then The Last Story and Pandora's Tower were both 2012. And I think you guys got The Last Story only a few months after us, but Xenoblade and Pandora's Tower were a big struggle. And I think Pandora's Tower came out in 2013 for you, which is the Wii U second year.
Yeah, I do remember that those games... It was weird. So like working in at a secondhand like mom and pop video game shop for a long time, and I was also at GameStop actually when all of these games were coming out, and so Xenoblade came out, and basically everybody that was into RPGs just bought it, even if they didn't have intentions of playing it. They just bought it for the fact that it felt like you had to do it. And then The Last Story came out, and Pandora's Tower did as well. And for me, I bought them with the intentions of playing them, and then never did, unfortunately. Well, I played some Last Story now, but I remember when I was at the local used game store, we had 4 or 5 copies of Pandora's Tower sealed that people had traded into us because they had just bought it because they wanted to support the cause and and make sure that people. That the game sold well enough, and maybe there were some people out there as well that were buying it in hopes that it would be rare and expensive someday. But for the longest time, it didn't really like accrue value. It just kind of stayed where it was, and now both of them are starting to get more expensive. But it was just cool to see so many people supporting those games because it was such a struggle to get them released here. I hope Nintendo really like listened and weren't planning all along to release Xenoblade, because I think Xseed or somebody like that, like some other third-party company released Last Story and Pandora's Tower here in the U.S. and Nintendo exclusively released Xenoblade through GameStop actually.
That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, it was a nightmare trying to get those games out. But when it did, it just felt like. I felt like the internet and like all of the RPG and like Wii owners it felt like we won, like it was we had been heard finally. It was really cool. It was a good moment.
The Wii is a very different console without those games. Like those were the last hurrah for the platform, and I can barely associate the Wii without Xenoblade. Like that's one of the biggest games on the entire system.
Do you know what else is one of the best games on the entire system? Mario Strikers Charged Football.
Hell yeah, it is. I think that was the first Mario game in the UK for the Wii, and the first online game. And that was my first time really playing online on my own console. Because otherwise, I always played like Halo 2 online at a friend's house or something. But Mario Strikers Charged was just my first time to really just, in my own home, play against the world. I was stealing my neighbor's Wi-Fi, but I was still doing it. So I have really fond memories of that game.
I can't remember why I picked it up. I think it would have been at uni and stuff, obviously, but I picked it up and I remember thinking, oh yeah, people have said good things about this. I did not expect the level of depth and detail and just sheer, I suppose in some ways, un-Mario-ness about it.
Yeah.
Like it really, it still definitely fits within the same paradigm, but not like so many other Mario games that are so safe. So, it's Mario and friends, ha da 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 da. No, it's like there's violence, there's arrogance, there's emotion, there's Mario leaping up into the air, his eyes glowing as his foot draws back and then slamming the ball forward. Why don't we get any more of that?
Many believe that this is the game that changed Nintendo's view of Mario, because everything from there on was totally different, like much more vanilla in direction after Strikers Charged. Yeah. And even some people deep in the industry have been told this apparently. So if that's true, that sucks, because that had such a personality. Like Mario characters can get electrified in this game.
This was the team that made this was Next Level, right? That made Punch-Out and Luigi's Mansion 2 and 3 at least, right?
Yeah, totally.
And you can see it because, oh my god, they still managed to inject a load of personality into Luigi's Mansion 3, even with these supposed restraints. Let's not talk about Luigi's Mansion 3. Not a Wii game!
No, not a Wii game.
That's a point. Why wasn't there a Luigi's Mansion game on the Wii? That would have been ideal.
It doesn't make any sense. One of the many mysteries of the world.
The Wii did get some surprising stuff, though. There was a lot of revivals on the Wii. Like, Kirby hadn't had a console game since the N64. At least not like a pure platformer.
Oh, yeah.
But the Wii had not only Epic Yarn, but Adventure Wii, or Return to Dreamland as it's called in America. And Donkey Kong Country returned. Like, DK was in such a weird place from N64 to Wii, where it was just weird spin-offs for a long time. Like, Jungle Beat was great, but just, there was no actual, like, no return of Donkey Kong Country, but it happened, and it was called Donkey Kong Country Returns. And like Punch-Out came back. Sin and Punishment got a sequel, which was awesome as well. It's the Excite series. We got Excite Truck and Excite Bots and the WiiWare game, Excite, what's it called? Excite Bike World Rally? Was that what it was called?
Oh yeah, that sounds right.
And shouts out to WiiWare, because I don't think we're probably going to mention it that much, but like World of Goo and Final Fantasy The Crystal Chronicles, My Life as a King, and Lost Winds, and Mega Man 9. Like, there was a ton of great stuff on WiiWare.
That was such a crazy, like, that was the first place I ever spent money on digital games. And I think it always feels weird to look back and be like, wow, I spent I still have all my Wii Point cards from over the years, and it's weird to look back and be like, wow, I spent $200 on digital games. Ugh. But it was such an impressive thing for the time to be able to like download these classic games and new fully fledged titles. Yeah. I think there was a period where I was like, every week I was looking forward to the next WiiWare title and or whatever was coming to the Virtual Console. And I think actually that's way back in the day. I'm gonna mess this up hardcore, but Nintendo Life was I think joined with, maybe Alex knows better than I, but there was a website that we owned or we were part of called WiiWare World or something like that. I can't remember, but I used to go there all the time for WiiWare reviews, and it was one of the only websites. What was it called? Do you remember, Alex?
I think it was WiiWare World.
But it was so cool because every week, like I didn't have internet at home, so I was like you, John, I was bumming off of my neighbor's internet, or I'd go to friends' houses and take the Wii over to download games or updates, but then I would go to the public library and I would spend my hour on the internet looking at Smash Dojo, like you guys were saying, and I'd be on Game FAQs, but then I would also go to this Wii website and read the reviews on whatever was coming out soon, and even though there were all these like high budget, titles coming to Wii, I was always excited to see what some of these smaller titles were as well.
Totally.
And I didn't buy every one because we were kids and couldn't afford to just throw money at every game that came out. But it was cool to see that there was a website out there that was like taking care of us, like the people that were interested in these littler titles.
I was so similar to you, Xeon, where every Wednesday I'll check the Wii Shop channel and just see what was new. And like I've said this many times before, but I wasn't really that into Nintendo's consoles before the Wii, and so this was my way of playing NES and Super Nintendo and N64, and even TurboGrafx. I discovered like Bonk's Adventure through this thing.
The most impressive Nintendo system.
Yeah. And without it, I wouldn't be like this into Nintendo's history. I wouldn't have played so many of their games, and like even regional exclusive stuff. Like Mario RPG never came out in the UK, and I remember seeing that there was like 100 Wii points more than other games because it was regional exclusive. And I was like, what's the deal with this? So I just gave it a go blind. I didn't research it at all, and I loved it. And there's so many games just like that. It was a great time to really look back at the industry. It really respected everything that came before. Before we wrap up, though, because I think we can talk about every game that we had for a very long time, and we don't have that time. So I want to just talk individually about one game that wasn't a big mainstream game, that wasn't like a Mario or a Zelda or a Wii Fit or whatever. Just one hidden gem of the Wii that we all like. Because the Wii's full of them. There's so many games on this thing, and many of them, yeah, they are shovelware, of course they are. But there's also tons of things hiding within all those needles. So, Xeon, is there one game that really stands out to you that many people probably haven't even played?
Yeah. So a lot of my Wii lineup of the games that I played were very mainstream titles. I suppose maybe not then, but they are now. Like I played WarioWare Smooth Moves at every family gathering or party that I could. We played Wii Sports Into the Ground. I also played. I played some Sonic and the Secret Rings. Unfortunately, bought that on launch and had a pretty sad time. I didn't know that it was just a bad game. I just thought I was bad. But the one series that I really got into that I feel like nobody cares about at all, and if in the comments, please let me know if I'm wrong on that. I would love to be corrected. Is the Trauma series? Trauma Center. I got Trauma Center Second Opinion on launch with the Wii. I got that along with Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, and I played them both on day one. And even though I could have just played Zelda the whole time, and I loved it. And it turns out that game was a remake of the first Trauma Center game. But the one that I loved even more was they came out with Trauma Center New Blood on the Wii as well, which was just a spin-off title, I suppose. But then they came out with Trauma Team, which it's been years since I've played this game, but I played it beginning to end with a partner that I was with at the time, and it basically is like, so it's this crazy, like, you're using the pointer controls to basically perform surgeries on people. But the interesting twist with Trauma Team is that you're playing as 6 different characters throughout the game, and each of them they're a different part of like an emergency team. Like one might be a surgeon, one might be a first responder. Somebody might work exclusively on brains, and you have, all of their stories as well are intertwined. This isn't just some simulator game where you're just performing surgeries. The story is dynamic, and it completely sucks you in. Probably much like I don't know, maybe like Grey's Anatomy, but without without all of the really mature stuff. This game, looking at the box now, it just was rated T, so it just had blood and some random violence. But one other thing that I remember about it too is that this came out. Let me see, when did this come out? 2009, at least in the U.S. here, and this was around the time I think I had gotten my PlayStation 3. And I was playing a lot of Uncharted at the time as well, and I realized that's not a Wii game at all. But the reason I bring that up is because it turns out that the voice actor of the main character in Trauma Team is Nolan North, the guy who voices Nathan Drake in Uncharted. And for the longest time, I knew that it sounded familiar, and it was driving me crazy. And then finally, I looked it up and was like, "What? How is that? How is Nathan Drake this kind of edgy emo kid surgeon?" Because the main character looks like he's straight out of a Persona game. And I wish, if you've ever been interested in the Trauma series and you want to start somewhere, Trauma Team, you can't go wrong with it. And I can't remember if I mentioned too, but it's co-op as well. The whole game is. So there's some really cool parts where like you and whoever you're playing with have to work together to make sure that the person that you're trying to keep alive does not die. Or maybe you're both like out in the field trying to keep 2 different patients alive, or 4. And it just, like, talking about it again makes me want to go back and play it, because it was a great time, even though you're dealing with so much death.
It's an Atlas game too.
It is, yeah. Trauma Team is the bee's knees for sure. There's even like, looking at the box, there's even a guy that looks like Spike from Cowboy Bebop in here. You just have you got a wide range of characters. It's really cool.
So Alex was less into the Wii, so I'm not expecting like a plethora of stuff here. But were there any big hidden gems that stood out to you?
Well, the thing is that the one that immediately leaps to mind is not entirely a hidden gem. I think it's one of those ones where it is largely known, but even so, it may well be forgotten. We'll go with that angle. It's Deadly Creatures.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a game that, don't get me wrong, it's not perfect, but it just does so many interesting and different things. Like, if you don't know, you play the game as a tarantula and a scorpion. You flip between the two of them, and there's some nonsense going on with the plot, like some cowboys or something trying to find, I don't know, like gold or something. And I don't care. Like you like see them walk past, you see a boot, and sort of it's walking past, and that it's an interesting idea, but it just doesn't pan out. There isn't enough meat on the bones for the plot. But the actual gameplay, you're playing as a tarantula and as a scorpion, like in a real environment as well. And I'm baffled why that hasn't been done before, to any sort of serious extent, or indeed since. It's such an original idea, and like you've got to battle rattlesnakes and things like that. It's genius. It's really good fun as well. It's not very long. You can kind of breeze through it in just a few hours for memory. Not like 2 hours, but I would say like 4 hours you could do everything. And it's just one of those games where it was just different and original, and I was disappointed there was never anything more like that.
I remember staring at screenshots of that in the official Nintendo magazine. I was like, man, I need this game. You're right though, it doesn't quite stick the landing, but there's nothing else quite like it, which still makes it really valuable. And that's
Yeah.
like my favorite kind of hidden gem. I mean, it feels rough in a lot of ways, but it stands out though because of that.
The Wii has so many titles that we could sit and talk about like random little games like that forever.
Yeah,
I
there's
think,
hundreds.
and be like Deadly Creatures has been on my radar for a long time, but I've never given it. I don't own it, and I've never given it a shot either. But I'm glad to hear that Alex liked it so much.
It costs like tuppence. You might as well pick it up.
My hidden gem, I'm not sure how hidden it is really. I want to give a quick shout out to 2 Nintendo games though, because Nintendo, they had a lot of big games on the Wii, but some fell under the radar. So quick shout out to Excitebots, which we never got here in Europe, but it's incredible. It's Excite Truck, but just refined, much better. And then another Code R, which we got in Europe, which you didn't in America, and that's Trace Memory, I think it's called on DS.
Right.
And
Yeah,
that was-
yeah.
that was
Another
so
Code R
cool.
is that's the sequel, isn't it? Or is it a remake? Or?
It's a sequel, yeah. And there's one puzzle that I loved where you solve that the solution to the puzzle was pressing the home menu, which feels so clever. But yeah, my actual hidden gem though is Fragile Dreams, and Zeon might know of this.
Really? I have it, but I've never played it.
Okay, well we're talking a bit about Silent Hill Shattered Memories earlier, and this game works in a very similar way, where it's basically you move around with a torch. And the difference, though, is it's very anime-inspired. So you've got this very sort of timeless-looking visual style, but the atmosphere really drags this game forward. Like the music here is amazing. I was watching Japanese trailers of this before it got localized, and I was wishing it would get localized, but it took a little while. But the music was just so catchy. I'd end up like listening to the main theme on YouTube again and again. And I adored this, and it's a pretty rough game. Like the combat isn't great, but just the world design, like this desolate, dark but also quite light anime world, really does come to life through all the music. And it's a stunning game. Definitely not the best on the system, but it's just something that I'm glad exists.
I'm really going to have to give that a shot soon. I've seen that it's very, very expensive now, and it's one of those games that makes me happy to have purchased it when it was cheap, because it's.
Yeah.
The Wii just seems like it keeps getting crazier and crazier in that regard. But that's what happens when I guess people start talking about their favorite Wii games that nobody
Yeah,
else has ever
we're
played,
sorry.
right?
Yeah, they're
Very
so
sorry.
sorry. Yeah, we just want people to enjoy the games. We don't need to make them so nobody can buy them. Come on.
I'm sure the comments can talk about their favorite games, because there's going to be hundreds that we've missed. Like Cave Story pretty much got its big break on the Wii.
Wow, yeah.
We got things like Klonoa. The remake of Klonoa was awesome. Mirror Master, the Demon Blade was amazing too. There's so many games you can shout out, and I hope that you guys do in the comments, because no way can we mention all of them. But are there any other memories you guys want to share about the Wii?
It could run Doshin the Giant.
It could.
It's not a memory, it's just a fact.
I don't. So I do have. I have a memory and then a thing I want to say. So there was one point. So I didn't buy. I pre-ordered Sin and Punishment at launch, but this was around the time where I didn't have as much money. Like I had money to throw at games, but not as much as I wanted. And I think I canceled the pre-order or switched to something else. And eventually, I bought it. Eventually, somewhere, maybe on sale or something. But anyways, I was playing that game with a friend, and I remember at one point. I think I played that through in one entire sitting. Rather, I should say, Sin and Punishment Star Successor, the sequel on Wii. And I remember at one point I was staring at the screen so long, like focusing on just dodging bullets and because it's this crazy. It's kind of like Kid Icarus Uprising, where you're flying around the screen and you're shooting nonstop and slicing at enemies, and it's just a jetpack joyride of a game. And but yeah, I was staring at the screen so long that, and I don't know how long this was, that apparently my eyes, like, I don't want to say they turned bloodshot, but they were strained from just this, like, I wasn't blinking, I guess. And I was hanging out with a friend, and the only reason I, like, stopped was because he, like, told me, he was like, "Hey, man, are you okay?" And you know, went in the bathroom and confirmed. But yeah, Sin and Punishment's a great game on Wii. Just be careful to not get too wrapped up in the excitement of the adventure.
You need to listen to the Wii Sports messages that say like, "Hey, why not take a break?"
For real. See, I need to go back and play that game again, because I haven't played it since. But yeah, I wonder if that game has any of those moments at all in there to tell you to slow. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that would break up the action and you know, the immersion factor. But that game apparently needed it. I needed to chill out. But I think the thing that I wanted to mention though is that it's the Wii really felt like, and maybe you were going to say this anyways, but the Wii really felt like an era where Nintendo was, they had the casual audience on lock. They knew people loved Wii Sports. They made a new one. They made Wii Music and Wii Party and Wii Play, and some of those were better than others, but people still bought them. And Nintendo, it felt like, was making all this extra money, at least from an outsider looking in. I have no evidence that this is how it played out, but it felt like they took risks on other things kind of more often than they do now, especially on the Switch. I think there's an argument to be made for that. Some people could say, well, we're getting a new Advance Wars and we're getting Big Brain Academy again, but it felt like the Wii was kind of an era where Nintendo was trying new things, and I kind of missed that. We, like you said, we got Excitebots and Excite Truck on that system. We got the birth of Big Brain was on DS and Wii. We got a sequel to Sin and Punishment. Not everything was a winner. We got Samba de Amigo. I guess I don't know if that was a remake, but I rented that and had a very sad time because I'd heard so many good things about the Dreamcast version. And I know that's a Sega game anyways, but it just felt like, we got a Punch-Out reboot on the Wii. That series, I feel like I was selling that game to a lot of people at GameStop back in the day, and all of the people that were buying it were the people that grew up with Punch-Out, that had played one on Super Nintendo or NES or something and wanted to revisit it. And it just felt like this was an era where Nintendo, they knew what they were doing, and they had some room to mess around and experiment, and I missed that. Like the Wii U the selection was so safe, I think, and the Switch has lots of excellent titles as well, but I feel like the Wii was like where Nintendo really got weird for me. I think the DS carries some of that too, but
Wii U was chasing the Wii. We got sequels to Wii Sports, Wii Fit. We got sequels to Mario Brothers U, Mario Brothers Wii even. It felt like a lot of games were trying to recapture what the Wii had. And we even had games like the Wii had the last Wario Land game, like Wario Land Shake It, or the Shake Dimension as we call it.
That was
totally,
a
you're
damn
right.
good game. That
it's beautiful, yeah. I mean,
I was just watching it. Yeah,
it's in 4:3, so like that's the only visual limitation, but still, the actual artistic vision is so good.
Yeah, I was just watching yesterday. I was redoing my room a little bit, and I was watching the Ant Dude video, all retrospective about all the Wario Lands, and I had no idea that it has like full-on anime cutscenes. Yeah. Such a weird thing. But
I picked it up for a song.
Yeah.
I've got it on my shelf now, and it's a game. I never completed it, but what I played, I loved.
That's the thing with the Wii, is it just has so many oddball titles like that I think there are a lot of systems out there that have their strange, great games, but the Wii really seems to have, for how much shovelware it has, it also has a lot of great gems that people just, I don't want to say take for granted, but it's just like we just don't realize it sometimes,
I think a lot of people looked at the shovelware and said, nope, not for me, the Wii sucks. But doing that dismisses so much of what it had going for it. Like things like Sakura Wars even had another life on the Wii. Lost in Shadow was a cool little title. The Fast series, like Fast Racing League and Fast Racing Neo, that had the start on the Wii. There's a lot of really cool stuff, and as I was saying earlier, we can shout out titles forever, but it's probably best that we wrap this thing up. So let us know your Wii memories in the comments below, and mention any game that we didn't mention. Rhythm Heaven Fever is one that we didn't mention. Be sure to point to that subscribe button and click it, and we'll see you next time. Bye everyone.
We will see you soon.
Did anyone else pay full price for Final Fantasy Fables Chocobo's Dungeon and find it kind of boring?
I didn't, but I paid full price for that Crystal Chronicles game that was also on DS and had crossplay with the Wii. Echoes of Time,
no.
Is that what it's called?
No. Oh, no. Dude, I booted that up a few months ago, and I saw
the
that
Wii
it's
version,
rough.
wasn't it literally the DS version?
Yeah.